DeLeon Springs, one of the many springs that flows into the St. Johns River. It contributes about 30 million gallons per day. Stays at a constant 72 degrees throughout the year. In the summertime, it feels like you jump in an ice water, and in the wintertime, it feels warm to you. It's used year-round by a lot of people to swim every day in there. It contains a lot of sulfur, a lot of lime, and it is drinkable, because a lot of kids drink the water that comes out of there. Ponce DeLeon came here and discovered Florida in 1512. In fact, it was on Easter Sunday. He landed and began his fabled search for the Fountain of Youth. And one of the places he was reputed to have come to was what's now called DeLeon's Springs. He came up the St. Johns River, because the St. Johns is a north-flowing river. He went through a large lake, which would be Lake George, and then through Woodruff and Dexter, and end up the run and into DeLeon Springs, and to a large spring there that he got out and drank the water and waited to become young, and his dream was dashed again, and he went to look for another spring that would hopefully be the magic one that was going returning back to a very young man. We're coming on the road coming into the springs here from the town of DeLeon Springs, because the spring itself is located about a half a mile north of the town of DeLeon Springs on Highway 17 in Volusia County. And this is the original road that ran down there. You can see it's an old dirt road. And this is some of the people that have been down there visiting, and they're headed back to their hotel, probably to the DeLeon Hotel, which was in right downtown DeLeon Springs today. It's a bank on that site now. This is some of the very early pictures of the spring. You can see it's just it's about 60 yards across it when it didn't have a wall around it. And you can see the vegetation growing right down to the water, and then the water drained out of here and went down the Spring Garden Mud Lake and down the run into Lake Woodruff and then into Lake Dexter and into the St. Johns. This is just the first little old road across. This is the road we saw a minute ago coming in here. And this is where it went across the run coming out of the spring. It's still very wild and native looking as in this picture here today. This is another picture of it way in the early days. You can look back up in this tree here. You can see the wheel of the old sugar mill that's been built there. And the spring is back in the back right in here. This is my picnic on the spring there, and then you can see the boil out in here. And these people, this is probably in the early 1890s, maybe. Now you can see the earthen dam has been put up around it in this picture, and a building built over in the back there's a kind of a boathouse. And these gentlemen are sitting out here from a Sunday afternoon picnic, I guess there. And this is the first bathhouse built there. You can see it in the back here. This is set on what's the south side of the spring today. This spring is, it stays at 72 degrees. It was originally used, the mill and all there was, the Spanish used it to grow indigo here. And the indigo pits were all around the Spring Garden Mud Lake. They smelled so terrible because the leaves off that thing were put in the pits, and they were allowed to rot in there, and they formed a blue dye, and the sun would gradually seep all the water out of it, and they would take that out and mash it into cakes, and those cakes were about the size of a good-sized brick. And those bricks of the indigo at one time were probably more valuable than gold, because that was shipped over to Europe to use in the dyeing clothes. I guess all the clothes must have been blue back in those days, but that's what it was used for. And in 1631, I think it was, Audubon came by here and saw Colonel Reese here. And he asked him then why it had a S, why they called it Springs, DeLeon Springs. And he said, well, at one time there were actually two springs here, and for some unknown reason one of them dried up and they filled it in. Probably the roof caved in on the spring down there and just stopped it up, and it all continued to flow out of the one spring. But that's why it is called Springs instead of Springs, that's like Blue Spring is called, because there was actually two here at one time. This is another picture of the bathhouses there, and you can see this is back up in the back in there where the big oak trees are today and the azaleas and so forth. It makes it so pretty in there. The oak trees aren't very big because this was all big vegetable garden. They grew a lot of sugar cane back here, and until the Indians destroyed it, and when they raided it, it was all sugar cane, and some cotton was grown in there. They had one time had 3 cotton gins on the site here. There's a crowd out there on a Sunday, probably in the summertime. You can see the boiling up here, and the bathhouse that they had there. And this is back up in the woods, going to the south and to the east. To the west is where all the sugar cane was grown. And this is some of the people on the dock there. You notice their beautiful bathing suits there. And one of these men here is Mr. Clow. I think it's this gentleman right here. Clow Street in Lake Helen is named for him. But his family actually pronounced it Clough instead of Clow. And he was kind of in a partnership with John B. Stetson in a bank there in DeLeon at one time. And he owned the springs here for a while. This is the old mill here, the old site of the old mill. When the Union came in here in 1864 and destroyed the mill, they destroyed the house, but they did not destroy the wheel. For some reason, they left the wheel intact. They took the machinery out of there and they took it down and throwed it in the spring, which they recovered eventually and brought back out and put back into use. Here's some people that was out here on a picnic, and they're all gathered up on the wheel there. As you can see, that was a great place to get a picture taken. Now, you see the wheel finally fell over, and this was in the early 1880s. It fell over like this. They eventually righted it, and when they rebuilt the place, the mill house in the early 1890s, this was put back into use, and as far as I know, that's still the original wheel that's sitting under there today. It's not turning because it's too bad a condition to turn. There you're looking right through the wheel out onto the mud lake. It's a nice color postcard of the mill site and the old earthen dam that was first put around it. And you can see the mill house there. That's the second one built after the the Union troops destroyed it, and it was rebuilt. This is what it looked like then. And you notice the trees are starting to grow back here now. And this is a picture of the Spanish and the English works there. These bricks were brought over from England, probably used as ballast in the bottom of the sailboats, or the sail ships. And these were brought up here and used to make the vats with. You can see the kettle here. There's still one of the kettles, or 2 of them up there today still. And these were used to cook down the cane in to make syrup, the cane juice. And then on down to sugar. And that's one reason it was destroyed by the Union forces during the war, because they were making sugar here and using it for the Confederate soldiers. This is just some more pictures of the old ruins, the English ruins there where they had their place. This is an early picture of the mill there, the old, that you can see the wheel and the mill there. This is looking out over the field. You can't see very much of the field. And this is the water run here. The part of it was deflected under there, and part of it came on out to run. Now you can see in this picture, this is on the west side. You can see the old Spanish chimneys there that were left intact, and they're still there today, part of it. And the old roof on it looks about to fall in. Needs a lot of work done. Then needs a lot of work done on the wheel now. The building's still in pretty good condition. And this is a picture of the boats come up there, and you can see the walkway across the run. Because it said the run came out here, and it came out through underneath the wheel there to turn it, using it to grind flour with too, and their meal, and even after they quit making it, using it for a press for sugar cane. This is a fellow standing up in there. He's standing up on the wheel. I don't know whether he's going around with it or whether the wheel's not running, because they could stop up all the water right here in this gate and stop all flow from going under there, so it wouldn't move at all. Now this is the south end of the mill, where you'd walk up to or drive up to today to go into the restaurant. You'd go in this door right here today to go into the restaurant. When they started cleaning out the springs after one time there, they were dragging the log. There's full old cypress log there where the trees had fell into the spring. They pulled them out. Of course, they were still good, and they cut them into lumber. And they also found about 6 or 7 Indian canoes in there at that time. And they took the canoes out and some of the lumber, and they stored them up in the top of that building. And they went there one time to see what it looked about those canoes. And somebody had taken them out of there, and they don't know where they went to. They were just gone. And that's the old wheel there. They've got it propped up evidently there. That's when they were trying to get it put back together and building a new building around it. But you can see the props here all along here holding it up. They've done the same thing today because it's in really bad condition. The old sugar mill over there the wheel is in very bad condition. Hasn't run in many years because of the condition of it. And it's if you can see the bracing on it now, it's holding it up, and it's expected in the near future they're going to go a complete renovation and the wheel repaired and put back where it'll run again. The old diving board here and the earthen works here, and that was a boathouse over there. This is one of the most widely circulated postcards that you'll see of the springs, and that's over here. But look at the field out here now, and think about what's there today. There were the big oak trees back there and the azaleas and everything, and you don't see them in this picture because they're not there. This picture is approximately maybe a little over 100 years old, so you can now figure out how old those trees in the back are. If you look into behind the mill there, in this live view today, you'll see the complete change in the character of the land in there, because that land in the early pictures of about a century ago was all farmland, and today it's grown up in magnificent, beautiful live oaks and water oaks. Here on the DeLeon Springs property is one of the largest pine trees there is in Volusia County. Only one other will equal it in size at all, close to it, or maybe a little more, is a pine tree on the Blue Spring State property down on the Stark tract north of the springs. Now, this pine tree is not a yellowleaf, long yellowleaf pine. It is a black pine, or the pine that usually grows in the low swampy areas. And this is probably a very unusual tree in this size of this type pine. It goes up 30 feet and forks, and then goes up to a height of about 110 to 120 feet high, and at 3 foot above the ground, it's 3 foot and 9 inches in diameter. This is some kind of a 4th of July or some celebration time. Again, you can see that run that we spoke of earlier coming out by the mill here. And just another picture of the mill and the water coming out here. This is a water wheel that was over there. You'll see some more of it in a minute, but that was a thing for the kids to play on. I never saw it in my lifetime, but so it was there before I went out there in the early 30s. This is the boathouse that was over to the south of the spring over there. This fellow here is probably hauling feed and stuff up there for the animals that they had there. And this is the old pavilion. This is sitting up on the mound where the ranger's house is today. Now, this was quite a popular place. On Friday nights in the summertime and the weather was right, they'd have dances out there, square dances, and Mr. Bushnell would come from DeLeon and bring his little band out there, and they'd play music for the dances. On top of the old mound where the pavilion once sat, and the other house is the home now of Steve Banton, the park superintendent at DeLeon Springs. There's some Stetson girls that'd come out there for lunch. They'd rent a wagon and a mule or a couple of horses, and they'd pull the kids out there from school, from Stetson, and bring them out here for picnics. They usually, I don't think they probably went swimming, but they just came out as an outing for them to come out here. This is some of them in the same, out there again, and you can see the boys are with them in this picture. This is probably on a Sunday afternoon that this picture was taken. Now, there's some kids sliding down the slide there where the water comes out. They've changed the type of I guess, water flow coming out of the springs. They've got these drop things. If these were dropped down, and they can shut off the water to divert more of it under the mill, or they can pull it up and close the one at the mill and stop the water from coming in there. But it's a favorite place for children to slide up and down that thing. And there's some of the Stetson students out there standing on the on one of those trap doors there that would lower and raise the water in the place. You can see the building over in the back here. They also had other residents out there. Folks, this is a genuine piney wood rooter. You can see the nose on that hog, and that's because she needed to try to root something out of the ground to keep alive out there. And this is a spring here out on the Spring Garden Mud Lake. You can see them over here in this picture here. This is on the north side of the hotel, and this is over in the point, going out of Mud Lake, going around toward Lake Woodruff. Now, this is the first building that was actually built other than the boathouse and the bathhouses. This is Jake Conrad. Now, Jake owned a sawmill up in Glenwood, commonly known as Bond's Mill, but he bought it from the Bonds. He also contributed most of the money to the building of Conrad Hall at Stetson University. And it had burned within about 2 years after they built it. It was a wood building, and it was rebuilt with brick the second time it was built, and Mr. Conrad contributed some money to it at that time, but he did not contribute at all. Mrs. Stetson contributed to it, and some other folks to get that rebuilt. You can see the building right in the background here, and you know, walkway across to get over to where the mill house is at. And notice the steps going up this tree here, and the kids would climb up here and go out on that limb and dive into the pool there. And this is just looking across that. You can see the top of it has been changed in this picture. This is another picture showing that the same building. In the background there you see the old boathouses. And this is the same picture, but it's not color. Now, some of these pictures come out in color, so these old postcards were not in color when they were made. They were made in black and white like you just saw there. And they were sent off and hand-painted and returned to the United States, and they sold them for a penny. And this is, you never believe what you see in an old colored postcard because they added things to them to enhance them, make them prettier. These boats and these people were probably never in there. This was an addition to enhance the picture. Again, they've changed the way of water flowing out. You can see the pipes coming out of there. They had terracotta pipes coming out, and they used them for several years until some kids tried to go through them, and one of them got hung up in there and drowned. So they took that out and made just a waterfall little type of thing coming out of there with rocks and stuff on it to replace that because this was too dangerous. This is a picture of the dock there and the kids swimming off of it in the old buildings. This is another widely circulated postcard with the boats out here and the mill house in the back there, the water wheel. Now they've added another thing. You see this? That's a slide that we'll see in a minute. They had a cable went from one side to the other, and you could slide down that thing. And this was a diving place here. And you can see that old tree was made, and they got a board in it, and a man standing up there. He's getting ready to dive in the springs there. There's that rope running across that I was talking about, or slide. There's a kid hanging on it, sliding down it. And remember, these were made with old cameras. This was an old picture that came off a glass negative. And how they could stop it, because the exposure was restricted by the sun. They'd take the cap off of it and time it for the amount of sunlight they thought it needed and put it back on. How they made these moving pictures with it, I don't know, without getting them blurry, but his photographer evidently knew what he was doing. Now this is an old slide that stood right by the stand there. It wasn't there evidently very long because somebody probably got hurt on it. You can see the people sliding down it in this picture. I've never seen but two other pictures of it, so it was there a very short time. This is again some of the things. This is a boil here. That's Mr. Lee's boat, Blish Lee. He was a very early person in DeLeon there. He along with Bert Fish, his father, had a store out at Spring Garden, a little community out to the east of here. And this was his. He had one of the first inboard motorboats there was there. And this is the tree where there's a diving board. You can see the people up in it, but they're not fixing to go swimming because they got their clothes on. Unless they fall in, then they'll go swimming. Now this is evidently a very admired young man, because all these girls has got their box camera taking a picture of him. He's in some sort of a uniform. Looks like he might be a Western Union delivery boy. But they evidently all liked him because they all wanted to get his picture. We titled this picture Huckleberry Finn and Becky out on the lake there at Spring Garden Lake. And you see the boathouse in the back here. Notice the water in the bottom of the boat. All these old boats leaked. There wasn't one of them that didn't leak. They were just made out of cypress boards, and they hoped they swell shut tight enough that it didn't leak very much. There's some folks fixing to go out on the lake and paddle around in their boats out there. And they hope they don't fall overboard because there's nowhere in the world they could survive. They'd drown with all them clothes on. There they are out there. You can see how much room there is between the boat and the water. Not very much. So that young man that's rowing has to be very careful with them. Now this is a Sunday school picnic. The children are gathered up there on the edge of the lake to have their picture taken. And if you look at the little boys in their Lord Fauntleroy shirts and stuff, they look just about as happy as if they'd stuck a nail in their foot. These people are out there, and it's raining. You can see the raindrops in the water there. These pictures ankle deep. That's the name of the boat. But they're fixing to go down and go out the run and go to Lake Woodruff and back. Going down's easy. Coming back isn't, because you're fighting the tide or the flow of the water going back. Now, these are two bathing beauties out there in the 1920s. And if you look at these dresses, these bathing suits, you could take one of these suits and probably make about 6 or 7 swimming suits today out of it. And a lot of these, this one on the right, I'm sure is all wool, because most of the swimsuits, men and women back in those days, were made of wool. This lady standing out on the dock there, and you can see again the diving board up behind her. It's just shot across from the southeast corner of the pool of the spring, looking over at the mill house. Now this is a picnic at the spring. You notice a lot of folks out there. And then look at this is the first picture we see of this diving board. Now this is one of the churches in DeLeon Springs is having their baptism out there. This was a favorite place for them to bring them out to baptize them. And you see them coming down to the lake there to get ready to the spring, rather be ready. It's raining while they're doing this, and you can see that fellow, the preacher there, getting ready to dunk him. And here he's standing out in the water. It's hard to see out there, but he's standing there, and they're waiting to get somebody out and another one in, and stand there with their umbrellas while it's raining. It's a nice picture of the spring there, and the old boat dock in the back, and the mill house over here. And notice the water flowing out of that pipe. This is a pipe I told you that the little kid drowned it in. This is a picture of the kids out there in the inner tubes and playing. There's those pipes that's going out into that's letting the water out. And again, the diving board that we see here. These people are just out on the dock. There's some folks laying around out there, and all this is dead of winter. But you see there's no vegetation on the trees whatsoever. This is some of the rental boats. You can see this one here has got the high back on it. These could not be you could not put a motor on these. This one you could, but that one you couldn't. These boats were made to row, and they were called a box tedder style. And box tedder was the name of a gentleman that one time the Tedders managed the springs here, and made ice cream, and they'd sell homemade ice cream there. They'd make about 5 gallons a week that they would sell. Then they got 10 cents off when you come in. You had to pay them a dime to get in. This is just some more pictures of the boats in the boathouse there. These are the folks getting ready to take a run out to the Lake Woodruff. Most of these people are probably staying in the hotel up at DeLeon's Springs, in the town of DeLeon Springs, and they brought them down here to go out on the lake. And they're being towed by a boat with probably an inboard motor in it, and this little barge. That was very dangerous. They would never permit that today. And they're up now almost to the mouth of Lake Woodruff in this picture. They're almost opposite of Jones Island up there. And you see there's another island back here in the back. Now those when we'd have a lot of high water, and there was nothing exposed but these. That's a shell mound out there, an Indian shell mound on there, or a midden out there. And when the water's real high, as I was saying, the rabbits would congregate up on that thing because it was too wet out in the marsh for them. And if people go out there and take 22 rifle, and they could kill all the rabbits they could carry out of there, or on any of those islands out in that marsh that were underwater. That's all today as part of the federal duck refuge in there, and it's only limited hunting. It's during deer season in there. The Bob White packing house, which was owned by the Strawns, was right across the road from the springs here, and they had their annual picnic over here every year, and this is part of the people from there over at their annual picnic. And these folks are just swimming out there and having a nice Sunday afternoon respite from the heat. In the early 1930s, they had these donkeys out here you could rent and ride around at the springs. And some of the kids would come out and ride these burros of donkeys around the spring there. Now, this is the second building that was built there. This is where Jake Conrad's building was built. They tore it down and built this little bit bigger building, and it was out of stucco. It will not be there very long. It was built just about the end of the war, the First World War, and it will not stay there very long. This is another picture of it. Notice the old car sitting over here. These people drove down here, and there's a picture of it from the south side of the pool looking across at it. And this is just another picture. Look out onto the lake here. It will be replaced by the casino, they called it. It was not a gambling place, but it was a casino, and it was a hotel here. It had just a few rooms in it. I don't think it had about 10 or 12 rooms in it. Wasn't very many. And down below there was a nice restaurant in there. And they used to have plays out here in the summertime when I was a little boy. My aunt and my uncle lived out here. And on Sunday evenings, the kids they'd hang sheets up across the inside here, and the people would sit over on the far side, and they'd put lamps, kerosene lamps up behind them, and the kids would get it between the lamps and the sheet, and the shadows from them would be cast on the screen, and they'd do their play there by the shadows. That was quite a big thing for them back then. Now this is one of the prettier, it came off a brochure actually of the springs, and that's Miss Daytona Beach in that picture. Miss Daytona Beach today would not be dressed quite that heavily to have her picture made. But this was a real pretty picture of the casino here. This is a stand where they sold ice cream and cold drinks and etc. And you would come in here and get your basket and carry it back in the back of the hotel there to a little building where you could change your clothes. And you'd come up here and leave them the basket there, and then they give you a little rubber band, a heavy rubber band that went around your wrist with a metal number on it, a brass number. And so you come back, you turn that in to get your basket back to go change clothes again. Now, this is just a crowd. And notice the tower. This is the first time you'll see this tower. This tower was high. I don't know exactly the height of it, but it's awful high. And they finally you'll see it's going to be cut down because of the height of it. And this is just an ad for the hotel. And in this picture here, and the dining room that you see here. And this is a close-up of the dining area. They used to have a lot of nice things. This is the sitting room. They look out over the springs in here. They're only open in the wintertime. The hotel is not open in the summer at all. There's nobody to come stay in it then. In 1926, right after they walled this thing up, the springs up, put the concrete wall around it, they decided that they could generate electricity with that water wheel. So they built that thing high enough to force all the water they could through that wheel. But they forced too much water through there, and they built the back pressure on the spring was too much. So the spring broke up it came up out in the lake to the left, and kind of to the left in front of the mill house over here, and it dried up. You can see here, this is the bottom of the spring. It's just a little old puddle of water there, because there is no spring in there now. So then they had to go out And they brought in a dredge there, and they started pumping concrete down in the spring out here where the new spring was at, and trying to fill it up. They dumped concrete slabs in there and old automobiles and pumped more concrete in it until they finally filled this spring up back here, and it started coming out again where it belonged, where it is today. But for several months there was no water in it, and it took them a good while to stop it back up. This is another picture of a water wheel that was there that the kids could play on in the old pavilion back over in the back, the old casino. This is just a view of it taken from back up on the hill and looking out right over the mud lake going out towards Lake Woodruff. Now, the tall diving tower that was there. Now, this is the canoe club from Jacksonville that had come down. They didn't canoe all the way from Jacksonville. They probably launched their canoes there at the bridge at Volusia and came on up into the spring here. Now, this is when after the boy drowned in the water pipe, they did away with the pipes, and you can see these rocks here. And the water just flowed over these rocks and into the lake. Now, these became dangerous because there was so much algae growing on them that the kids would try to get out there and walk on them and fall and hurt them. So they did away with these and went to what was there just prior to the complete renovation of the whole spring that's taken place now. This is the first little house that was built on top of the mound, and it was later torn down. This is the entrance sign into the springs in the 1930s, and you notice that car there's an Austin Bantam. That was the first little car there was in the United States, and it was manufactured in the United States. There's the entrance at a later period of time. You can see the ivy growing on the entrance there. And this is that was torn down, and this was put up in the place of it. You see the nice entrance into the springs. This is a tour bus that the springs own that would go pick up people at different hotels around the area and bring them in here for the day. A 9-hole golf course located to the south of the springs here, where the fields used to be, where Chuck Lennon Park is today, where the ball field, soccer fields are at. And this was the clubhouse for it. It's just to the west side of the park, and you can see the interior of the clubhouse. Today, this was built during the boom in the 1920s, as the golf course was, to service a community of Berwyn Park out there. This is the golf course. And there's somebody playing on the golf course. This picture was taken in 1926. And this is the fountain of youth they had there. You go drink that water. I don't know where it come out from. I've often wondered if it didn't come right out of the spring, but I'm sure it didn't. But we'd go drink it and we'd run ask somebody, do we look any younger? And they'd say, oh yeah, you look a lot younger than you did when you started drinking that. And you just drank till you'd about pop because you thought you was going to make you younger. But there's that, again, you see the diving board. That sucker was high. And there wasn't too many folks that jump off of it. It was so high that they was concerned about it, and they lowered it down one notch to this. You can see where it's lowered down here, and they're going to lower it down again later to that notch. You can see, and it remained that way up until the 1950s. Now, this is Mr. Lastinger. Mr. Lastinger was going to sail that boat there to Spain. And he came out to the Bert, F.N. Burt, who we'll talk about in a minute, sponsored him, and he filled it up with his supplies and his water and stuff, and they carried him over to New Smyrna and put him in the river there, and he sailed out the inlet, and he made it out almost somewhere around the Gulf Stream, and that was about as far as he could make it, and he picked up and brought back in, and he tried it again. He made him a little bit bigger boat this time, and tried it one more time, and that didn't succeed either. So he gave up that idea, and as a bad thing to do because he could have never carried enough supplies to have made it over there. Now, Stetson University used to hold swimming meets here, and you can see the crowd at this meet, and you can see the corks in the water there. The lanes are laid out there for them to swim in. And there they are there, and you can see the lanes here where the kids are swimming in. This again is back in the 30s. They at one time had a bunch of flamingos there at the springs, and you can see the pen they kept them in because they didn't let them run wild there because the wildcats and stuff would get them, and they kept them pinned up there for the people to see. It's a real pretty picture taken of the springs not too long before it was around 1950 something. You can see over in the background here they built an underwater observation tank there. You can walk down in that building, you go underneath the spring, and you can watch the people dive in and swimming down there. And they had a water show that we'll see, and they come up on this side. We're going to see that in just a few minutes, but I'd be very remiss if I did not show you Birch Park. Now, Birch Park was across to the north of DeLeon's Springs there, on that point that comes out there where the lake makes its turn. Now, Mr. Burt, F.M. Burt, come here. He come here from Buffalo, New York. He built up Berwyn Park. He built where the racetrack is, the trotter track is out at Spring Garden. He was very wealthy. He had 2 suitcases of money, said, when he come here. One of them was to invest and the other one was to live on. Well, he wanted to buy the springs. At the time he wanted to buy it, it was not for sale. So he decided, well, I'll build my own spring. So he went across and bought that land on the point over there. He built this pool and put down about an 8-inch artesian well sunk in the ground there. And that flowed into this pool here, and it was very popular. It had nice picnic tables and pavilions over there for cooking and all, used by a lot of churches and groups for picnics. And it was, I only charged you a nickel to get in here. You had to pay 10 cents to get into the springs. So a lot of the people came here. It was very shallow. It was a nice place for small children to swim in because there was no depth to it at all. And this was just one of the buildings you see in the background that he had there. And that's a picture of a statue of Ponce DeLeon Springs there at the Birch Park. The Navy used this considerably during the war out here. They'd have their beer busts out here. They'd get kegs of beer and they'd come over here and they'd have ball games, and they would have fish fries and all. It was very popular with the Navy during the war here. And that was a big building. It was built out on the lake there. And it's gone today. The pool is no longer there. The St. John's water people come in there because there's no reason for that water to be flowing there. And they dumped concrete down that pipe till they finally stopped it up, and it no longer flows. But this is where you get your bathing, your basket to put your clothes in. And the bathhouse was to the right side of this picture. You can't quite see them, where you'd go up and change your clothes, and they rented boats out of there and kept boats in those underneath that building. We're looking down at what used to be Birch Park, as you saw it in the pictures there. There was a big boathouse there on the water at one time, and it's gone, and just this kind of a shed type boathouse is there today, and it's not in use. The state is considering trying to purchase this property in the near future. We'll go back over to the springs again, and this is during the 50s and all, when there was going to become another Cypress Gardens there. They thought, and that this is one of the tickets that is sold that you got in there. And out the front they had this nice statue. They put a rock wall all the way around the front of the place. And this statues of this young lady and Ponce DeLeon are no longer there. The wall has a mural painted on it now. And they had a little train. You can see this train right here, that they would pick you up there. No cars went down into the park at all. And Mr. Merle was the man that ran this little train here, and he would haul you around. And you notice a little car here, you could rent those things to drive yourself around in. The kids did them, but he would haul you all over the place in here and see all the sights. The Seminole Indians were there. They had a group of them that lived there that put on demonstrations, and this is, you can see there, they called it a tea hut. I don't know whether they served tea here or what, but this was, you can see that's their thing that they made their cornmeal in. Now around to the right, as you're going into the springs, would be on the east side of the springs was the jungle gardens. And you could take canoes in there, and you can see this big cypress tree in here. And there's also the train went around through there, and showed you some of it by the little train. This is the old nature trail that, when it was first built in here during the 50s, it was designed to be for the little tram train. Would haul you back through here and around to the canals back here where we're going. But since then it's just become strictly a walking trail into here, designed specifically for mosquitoes because they're very prominent in here. You can see a lot of azalea bushes planted along here. It's quite pretty in the wintertime or in the late winter and early spring when the azaleas are blooming. It's still very pretty down in here. Except for the azaleas, it's much like it was when the earliest days of the spring here, that when people first came here in 1512 when Ponce DeLeon came. See some nice cypress trees growing in here, and one of them back here we're coming up onto is the largest one left in the park here, or anywhere in this park. There's several nice sized ones in here though. I guess that thing is probably about, oh, maybe 5 foot in diameter at the most. This cypress tree, this Methuselah they call it, is about between 4.5 and 5 foot in diameter, and is reputed to be between 400 and 500 years old. It's a bald cypress, and when they logged this area through here, they didn't log this particular spot because they left quite a few trees in here that would be good saw timber at that time even. Just remember, every time you kill a mosquito, you'll have 1,000 come to his funeral. So don't kill one of them. They also had a little sightseeing boat that would take you around and on the shore part of it, and the canal is stopped up today. You can't get through it. But this was, they had animal exhibits out here on the islands, or not, a part of the peninsula out there rather, that you could go see, and they had swans and geese around out there too. This is a portion of the old canals that were dug out in here for the tour boat to bring you into. That this is all stopped up from the river out there now, and you can't get up in here with a boat of any kind, not even a canoe. During about 1953, they had an aquatic circus out there. This is an island that was built out just to the northeast of the mill out there, to where the little island is still today out there, where actually that was a place where they pumped all the cement and stuff in to stop the springs that came up out there. Addison Gilbert and his sister Mary Ethel Gilbert were responsible for really putting this thing together out there, and they were the major performers along with some of the other kids there. And this is some of their acrobatic things. They went on and were very, very instrumental in the Florida Flying Circus at Florida State University. Ad and his sister were. The island that you're looking at where the white bird is standing is where Jim Rushing used to come. He would jump his speedboat through the ring of fire. And also it was where the circus, or the flying trapeze acts, were set up at one time on this island prior to that. And this is the area that Sunshine Sally used to water ski in right here. And Ad was the catcher. He was the one that always caught the girls, and the men too that did the high flying acts up there. Now Mary Ethel would marry Sam Prather, who played the clown. He played one of the clowns there for this circus group, and this was quite enjoyable for the children, and it stayed there for a number of years, or not for 2 or 3 years, And then Lee Norwood purchased the ground here at that time, and he developed the other part of the circus that would follow this. And this is the acrobatic team that was out there. You can see them swimming in their precision swimming thing, and you could go down underneath the water and watch this from underneath. And this is Sunshine Sally. This was Clyde Beatty's, one of Clyde Beatty's elephants, a baby elephant, and they would pull her around. She was billed as the only water skiing elephant in the world at that time. Whether there was any more before or after that, I'm not sure. But she was very popular and a very popular thing. Now, out there on that island where they had the flying circus at one time, they had the boat that would jump through a ring of fire. You can see the big fire around there, and the boat would come up there and leap through it. You can see the front of the boat coming out there. This was another quite popular program. You know, it says, this is, like I say, was supposed to be another Cypress Gardens that just never did work out. This is the old vat in here where they used to bring the little baby elephant and the other animals, the ponies and stuff. They'd bring them over here to wash them and dip them in a material to kill the lice and the other things that would get on them. And they took off down to the rear of me here, to the left of me. Down in here, in this canal, is where the speedboat used to come up here, and they would service it here and get it ready to go out to the spring or into the river lake out there to do its act, to jumping through the fire and also pulling the elephant and also pulling the water skiers out there. There's a nice wooden Chris Craft speedboat that they use for that. And you see the paddle wheel boats that they rented there. The fellow asked me one time, said, "How fast will that thing go?" And I said, "Just as fast as you can paddle that rascal." And that's exactly what it made. It would not, even though you paddled it to death, it didn't move very fast anyhow. But there's the underwater observation tank here. All good things must come to an end, I tell you, and I guess that's true. When Mr. Thorthorn bought this place here, he came down from New York. He had had a spa up there that was taken over by a super highway that came through. And he was looking for something else to invest in, and he found out this was for sale down here, come down, liked it, and bought it. And he immediately, not immediately, but shortly after he bought it, he found out this old hotel here was loved by the people, but it was loved by termites more than it was people. This was an old stucco building built during the boom, and it was plastered on top of wood lath. Well, the termites went to work on it immediately because they just loved that wood lath in there. And there was just no way to repair it or anything, so he tore it down and built the present little bathhouse, really, that's there today. But he eventually would sell this to Volusia County, and they would donate it to the Florida Park Service in 1982. And now you can see that a lot of work been done on it the last year. It's opened back up to the public again. You can still go there to the pancake house and have your meals in the old mill house. You can make your own pancakes still there if you want to. And it's still very popular with people. You usually have to get a number to get in there because it's so crowded, especially in the summertime when all the people are out there. But it's still a wonderful place to visit. Some pretty sights there today still. The old cypress tree is still standing in the back, and one of the largest pine trees that there is in this country around here. Time will tell how long this will stay here. This is the bathhouse and museum that Mr. Tofern built after he tore down the old hotel. And this will soon have a conference room in it also. The future of the DeLeon Springs State Park, it looks very good. Now the pool is just undergone about $1 million renovation. As you can see, it has nice approaches into it, a beautiful place for the children, has wheelchair accessibility to it, and the outlook for this whole springs is nothing but brightness as we approach into the next century, and hopefully it'll be here for forever, since it is a property of the state of Florida and the people of Florida.